Good morning, everybody. And I'm grateful to Dr. Narayan Reddy for giving us this opportunity to reach out to all of you. As one of the earliest founder activists of the LGBT community in South India, the reason why we all want to be here and interact with the medical fraternity is that most of our issues are blocked or further complicated by our interactions with the medical fraternity, various medical institutions, lack of awareness, lack of access to resources, and lack of timely support for members of the community. And as my fellow colleagues will clarify and elucidate issues pertaining to the various community members, that everyday life is a struggle for all of us. And why this is important, why today is really important for all of us is that, as I told you, growing up as a young adult, when you come into your teens and you are grappling with your sexuality, you're trying to understand who you are and where you come from, one of the issues is sexuality and gender. And we all are products of environments that we are brought up in, whether it's religion, customs, rituals. And parents bow down to pressure, not from just society, but from the culture and religion and from the nation that they come from. So since I'm speaking to a kind of pan-Asian audience, we will try and make the comments and remarks more global, pertaining to the LGBT community. And just to clarify, when you look at the sexual minority community, there's so many letters thrown at you guys. It's like LGBTQIA, the alphabets keep increasing. And so there's a lot of confusion. We work with the government, and the government is like, what's happening? First it was LGBT, now it's LGBTQ, then it's I, then it's A. The list goes on. The requirement is more minute now. Once people have grappled with the idea of non-conforming heterosexual populations, who are, it's not your penile, vaginal kind of sex, it's something beyond the penis and vagina. All of us challenge a patriarchal system. So in a male-dominated patriarchal society that most of us come from, it is a challenge to us to overcome that obstacle of patriarchy where everything is dictated from a man's perspective. So as a man, as a 52-year-old man, I stand in front of you, I'm talking to you as an openly gay person. I challenge the norm or social requirement of a male in Indian society where once you cross a certain age, you're expected to get married. Cross a certain age, you have to not just be a husband, then you become a father. I do not fulfill any of these roles. So I'm seen as an incomplete individual in society. I don't get the respect and status that is accorded to a married man. If I go to a social function, I go to a family gathering, I am seen as this anomaly, this person who doesn't fit into the comfortable picture of what society and family should be. So it's discomfort, that which is not the norm, that which is not seen as normal. This is where all our discomfort comes from. And all of us, at some point, growing up as children, have had to deal with parents and family who are scared, who are petrified of the fact that their child is growing up defying certain norms and social mores that exist within their community, saying a girl should dress a certain way, behave a certain way. A boy should dress a certain way, behave a certain way. So this whole gender roles that we challenge. So as a growing up boy, if I dared to wear lip gloss, forget lipstick, lip gloss, it's seen as a girl thing. If I played with girls, it's not a boy thing to do. So these were all issues that came up, and where do we turn to? Especially in India, doctors are treated like gods. All of you, what you say is the last word in any ailment disorder. Fortunately for us, this year, a few months ago, the Indian Psychiatric Association has removed homosexuality from the list of disorders and illnesses that existed. The American Psychiatric Association has long since, in the early 70s, removed homosexuality as an illness or a disorder that has to be treated. But unfortunately, in India today, a lot of the children are taken to doctors to be cured, to be changed. So we hear horror stories of hormone therapy and electric shock therapy that is given to children much against the wishes. We have kids who've come into our center who've been incarcerated in mental asylums, who've undergone inhumane torture, all because the parents were scared that the child was not conforming to what a male or a female should show. So I'm not going to go too much in details. I have three extremely articulate and vibrant personalities and activists from the community from Chennai. It takes a lot of courage to come up here and talk to a group like this. Especially, fortunately, there is no press and media. So for some of us, coming out in the press is an issue. So I will first go with Yuvi. Yuvi is a young gay man, and he will talk about his experiences about being a gay individual. And yes, we will talk from an Indian perspective, or maybe a South Indian perspective, which will differ from the North, Northeast. Every region has its own flavors and situations that we have to deal with. And our plea and request is, all of you are doctors and from the medical fraternity, we need your help in helping people understand who we are. Thank you.
Vanakkam. I'm Yuvraj Harish. I'm from Chennai, South India. And it's a pleasure being here with so knowledgeable person. I would like to start with a very common notion. Just like other human beings, we all respect, we all deserve to lead a very normal, carefree, and protected life. The government is supposed to provide us. The law is supposed to provide us. The medical facilities is supposed to provide us. What seems natural is also unnatural. And what seems unnatural can also be natural. It also means diversity is all the earth has. When we accept diversity, when we accept when we can accept heterosexuals, when we can accept a boy falling in love with another opposite gender, why not we can accept or understand about a same-sex relationship? And the discriminations which I've faced during my exploration are many more. It started from the family. My family didn't accept me in the beginning. They wanted me to get married. I'm 25 now. For a 25 years old boy in Tamil Nadu or in India, it's like you have to get married. It's the right time for you to get married. If you're not getting married, you're incomplete man. That is how they complete a man's figure. And it's okay for them being that way because they have been brought that way. The law system, the medical system has to change so that they will understand what is the reality and what is the facts. I still see many people who do not understand the term even what is a gay is. And I also want to mention one strong thing which I had gone through in my life. During my explanation, I came out to my sister that I'm gay. She took me to a psychiatrist here in South India. That person took 5 counseling sessions, and the first session was a regular session, a common conversation kind of thing. The second one had a shock therapy. And I don't know why does an electric shock therapy or something has to be imposed to a normal person who is leading a normal life. The third, the fourth session went on. After the last session, the person gave me a few advices and he also gave me a few orders to do. I'm a fashion designer by profession. He gave me a few orders as well. And after a month, he calls me and asks me if I'm all right now. It's so crazy that people ask me that question. Being a psychiatrist in such a position, being a counselor in such a position, after giving me such a counseling and sessions, he asked me this. It's so unfortunate for me to live in such a place. And
Yeah, you have to wind up now. We have two other speakers.
all right, we are running out of time, it seems. I have more to discuss, but it's...
There is an open discussion after
Yeah.
the panelists speak, so feel free to formulate your questions, and you want to throw some questions at all of us.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I'd like to end with one short note. We are evolving, and love is all the human being need. Let us just spread love. Let us treat everyone with equality. Let the medical service provide the best services ever. Thank you all. Love you people.
Thank you. So that was a young man's perspective of growing up gay in a city like Chennai. Tamil Nadu is seen as a very conservative, traditional society, though we're very modern in many ways and we progress. One thing I should add that hailing from the neighboring state of Kerala, I was brought up in Chennai. I studied and did all my education here. One thing I've noticed that even though we see ourselves as traditional, we are a very tolerant and encouraging in that sense that they allow people to be. And that's the reason why the LGBT movement started and grew in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, and then how we've been able to reach out to neighboring states like I worked in Andhra, Karnataka, and Kerala, and help separate groups form there. So this is, my work has been since the early 90s, where HIV was seen as a major issue, and how I came into activism was I started working with HIV/AIDS as a threat to sexual minority populations, because at that time in '92, HIV was seen primarily as a male to female driven epidemic. There was no acknowledgement of same-sex behavior. There was no acknowledgement of the fact that anal sex was at high risk and was rampant in Indian society. So we were working with truckers, we were working with female sex workers, but we were not working with trans women, we were not working with male sex workers or gay men who were exposed to this risk. And my work started with WHO in '92, looking at, as an anthropologist, looking at a cross-section of Chennai, where I reached out to men who were having sex with men without the knowledge of the information regarding risk involved in unprotected anal sex. So that's how it started, and today, 25 years down the line, I've seen a lot of change. The Tamil Nadu state government has been amazingly supportive of the LGBT movement, which we have to say, I have to keep thanking the government for helping us grow as NGOs and do our work. We've had the first survey. We're looking at bullying in schools, and that's one thing UV also said. Discrimination starts at educational institutions where children drop out because they can't deal with bullying not from just the fellow classmates and seniors, it's also staff, educational staff who bully and abuse the children, and they drop out. So today, in general, if you look, and this is something Magdalene will also talk about, how you see trans women on the roads begging or in sex work. It is because we've denied them the basic human rights of education, access to education, and that's something she will also talk about. So without much ado, I'll go on to Magdalene. She was a school teacher. She was teaching English in a high school here, but ever since she transitioned from a boy to a woman, and she's a trans woman activist right now, she lost her job, and then she will talk from there. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good morning. This is Magdalene. So I was born and brought up in a town at Tirunelveli, so I'm basically from Nellai. All right, so I was born as a male, so many of the doctors, still let me start like this. So when I recently went to a doctor some 6 months, 7 months ago, I was not well, okay? So the doctor questioned me, do you get your periods regularly? So I didn't know what does she mean. So I had a spark whether she's commenting on me, or she still identifies me more feminine. So do I look more feminine, or she is commenting on me? So it went on like that. So we live in a society where doctors don't, have a clear identification, or they don't have any clear knowledge about who is a transgender. Because I clearly already mentioned there that I'm a transgender. So later moving on, coming on to the hormone treatments. Hormonal treatments causes a lot of things where many transgenders lose their life, where doctors do not give prescribed tablets. But still then, when I came and when I got, the transsex thing, my changes, it went on like that. So my breast developed, so I underwent surgery. So my family didn't accept me because I was born like that. So even so the society. So when the society doesn't accept, so my rights were denied. So my rights in school was also denied. So I left job. So I couldn't continue there because of my transaction surgery. So I do request fellow people to change up the mind of your born nature. Thank you.
Okay, just want to elucidate and just develop on what Magdalene and Yuvi said. All of us are biologically male, the three of us. We were born male, we continue as male. Magdalene made the decision to transition into a woman. So as a trans woman, there's a lot of gray area. A lot of men, a lot of people in the medical fraternity ask, why do you need to do surgery? Why can't you remain as a male? Why do you have to put your body through all these hormones, through these surgeries, through laser, to look like a woman, to become a woman? Why do you have to put your body through this when you were born a certain way? Now, the difference between being gay and being trans is that I identify as male, I have sex with men, both of us are gay and homosexual. So there's not even a issue of us wanting to be a woman. And here, what happens is, we have the paradigm of male and female. So for a trans person, she has to fit into the role of a woman to have sex with a heterosexual man. So the pressure on a trans person is to look as much of a woman as she can. So she'll do her laser, she will do all her surgeries, breast implants, augmentation. In Bangkok, if there are any people from Thailand, you will know to the extent that they go, they remove the last rib, the body gets more curvy, hips are implanted so that they get a fuller hip. Adam's apple is removed. So in the end, there's so much pressure on that individual to conform to what a man expects a woman to be. And this is reflected in the trans community in various levels. Financially, most of them can't afford the surgery. They can't afford the kind of cost that is inbuilt into becoming trans. It's in Tamil Nadu state government is now offering free surgery. The Kerala state government has offered free surgery for trans people from male to female. Now, one topic that I wanted to also just touch on is trans men. Yeah, so looking at surgery costs and how expensive it is medically for trans people to go through the process. And that for them, it is a calling, it is who they are. And for us to ask these questions, especially as medical personnel, why do you want to change? Why do you want your body to go through? Just one simple question. Nobody is going to live a life of humiliation and discrimination knowing that this is what their life is going to be all about. Right from the fact that she has to change every document she was born with. Still, Magdalene went through with it. That means this is who she is. And the fact is, as human beings, as fellow human beings, we need to understand, especially the medical fraternity. I keep restating this because in India especially, if the doctor says it's okay, everybody listens. And parents will always go to a doctor. And like what happened to UV, they will take as much money as they can from the parents because they will give false hope and promises saying, this child will change. He will become heterosexual. He will live the way you want to. They will get forced into marriages. And I have friends who have transitioned after getting married to women, after having children also. And then, because they have the financial freedom, they have made a choice to change and transition into a woman, which is heartbreaking because you're destroying so many families and what has happened. But that is who they are. And we are all products of the environment that we live in and the pressures that we're given as human beings. We all make mistakes. But the fact is that medical fraternity is our biggest support. And that's the reason why we all took our time out to come here and reach out to all of you. So over to my last speaker, Namita.
Oh goodness, hi tissues. Yeah, good morning everybody. My name is Namita and I am a queer woman. So when somebody says somebody is a queer woman, there is quite a bit of information that one needs to understand. I believe that I will be covering all people who have been declared or assigned female at birth, which would include, say, lesbians, within the cis spectrum, which is not trans. Then I will be talking about multisexual women, so your bisexual women, your pansexual women as well. And to move over to the trans spectrum, the trans men. And I believe that I have a few notes written, so please feel free to stop me in the middle of this particular talk if you seem to have questions about it. So a few years ago, back in 2014, when I first started advocating for queer women's rights, I was asked by this one doctor friend of mine who themselves is queer and refuses and doesn't want to identify so, as to what they need doctors, as in what I need doctors to understand and try and imbibe in their practice every single day. So I believe that I will never forget what I said. I said, I really wish my doctors didn't judge me. So for people who come from China, I'm sure you all know about the Shengnu, the leftover women, that is, for everybody else. It is a very Asian concept of chrononormativity. Don't you think when a woman turns 22, 23, you've got to have somebody to marry and you've got to have your own children, and it is very problematic, this particular kind of thought process that parents and other people get to decide what and how other human beings' lives are supposed to resemble, look like. This is specifically problematic in the case of trans men. Trans men are those men who have been assigned female at birth by looking at their external sexual characteristics, regardless of whether their internal sexual characteristics match this particular identification or not. So there are so many trans men out there who are desperate to leave the kind of cloisters that they live in, mainly because of the fact that we live in deeply patriarchal societies. We also know that it's a lot easier to control a woman's sexuality than it is to control a man when perceived so. Which is why we see very few trans men out and about who are able to identify as trans men, because they seem to have the social protections that they need in order to be able to advocate for themselves. Other trans men's psyche tends to mirror that of needing to be able to pass off as a cis man. If not, then they are definitely going to be subject to so many abuses. And it is not strange within the community of queer activists such as us, heavy trigger warning intended, that a lot of trans men are raped and beaten. And this is called corrective rape. And this is prescribed by quite a few of these doctors who think it is a curable disease or a disorder, which tends to cause a little bit of a setback when it comes to people trying to trust the medical fraternity and sorority, might I add. So something else that I did want to cover here today is the fact that very young queer people, mainly queer AFAB people who are assigned female at birth, either go through heavy self-loathing, or if they aren't self-loathing, they are very erudite about who they are and what they are. So as I did tell my friend who was a doctor, a very, very important tenet to follow here is not to do any harm in the way of judgment. So there is also this one trend, it's been following, I wouldn't say the entire category of doctors per se, but it is indeed a fact, which I'm sorry to say, is that doctors tend not to update themselves with respect to what has been proven in the recent times. And I believe that I was told by another doctor friend of mine that the medical term for this was being a dinosaur. This, I hope I don't, I mean, I definitely don't intend any ill will, of course, but it would be great if doctors did take the initiative to, you know, get certified on various different things such as gender, sexuality, modern, you know, it's very difficult to understand this as well, because we all know that we have studied what we are practicing, and it's very, it is more so in the medical fraternity that all of you are practicing doctors who happen to know exactly what you are on about. So, which is why it would be prudent, I believe, which is why I believe it would be prudent to be able to equip yourselves the most and be able to talk. And when I say talk, have open conversations with patients who do come with certain issues. And I'm just going to try and talk about two issues that did occur before in my speech here. One of which is, yeah, I'm going to. So one of which is this. Very recently, a young gay man who hasn't come out to his parents just yet, they decide to come out to them. And they took them to a doctor who decided to order a battery of tests to find out if the cross-section of his testes were intact, or you know, to understand what the hormone profile of the person was, instead of actually understanding the issue on the whole, which in the parents' psyche definitely translated into their child having a medical health problem rather than actually being a queer person. So this, I believe, might require some sensitive handling with kid gloves, but I should think, you know, it is not very difficult to do this in the first place. Another aspect of this would be that this is, yet again, heavy trigger warning, something that happened to a trans man friend of mine who got a stomach bug. I believe that was all that it was. And then when they went to the doctor, it became a whole triggering episode for which they refused to give them medication because they were, quote unquote, not a full human being. So things like these don't affirm somebody's human worth. So it's more so the duty of somebody who is perceived to be godlike by society to understand and affirm human worth. So I do believe that I have tried to cover most of the general aspects. If there are any questions, please keep them in mind because I'm more than happy to clarify them for you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we had three members of the LGBT community talk here. So you had a queer woman, you had a trans woman, and a gay man. There are other community members who could not come, like if you're looking at lesbian, there was intersex, there's asexual, pansexual, there are many other words and classifications that exist. So that's going into the nitty-gritty, but I think what the take-home message from all of us is that there's definitely a lack of awareness, there's a lack of knowledge and understanding of the LGBT community by the medical fraternity, and it's really appalling and scary. What we've been lobbying is also for sex education classes to look into sexuality and gender, so that not only faculty in education institutions that are dealing with children who don't conform to gender stereotypes, also to educate and hire officials in educational institutions where, when, in the case of bullying, we did a study in Tamil Nadu where we looked at bullying as a cause for dropouts in the LGBT community. And the stories were really heartbreaking. So we had a finding, it's there on the UNICEF website. And the educational minister has now made there's a directive from the educational board of Tamil Nadu that if anyone has seen bullying or is part of a bullying scene in a school or in any educational institution, there will be a redressal system in place. So that's the first step towards hoping that the education institutions will understand who these children are. And the whole thing is from childhood. So when you have parents bringing their kids, the children, to a medical person, asking for some sort of help, the medical fraternity needs to be armed with the knowledge of what they're dealing with. And it is that lack of knowledge. So even medical curriculum today, when you look at your average MBBS class, students that come out of MBBS college, there are so many misconceptions that exist. And these misconceptions are not been addressed by the medical curriculum today. If you go, I think all of you have to go to a higher degree to do sexology, maybe to grapple with sexuality and gender. So the average medical student has no idea. A lot of us go to the doctor near us. It'll be a general practitioner who has no clue. So a lot of parents, families do not have the financial capacity to search and look for, maybe online, for a specific consultant in this area who can help them. And that is the biggest issue with the LGBT community, where I'm not only talking about India, we've heard these stories from our friends in Asia, all over Asia. So I was at the Asian conference in Bangkok recently. We had speakers from Indonesia, we had Philippines, Burma, Cambodia, China, and Thailand, apart from India, and of course, Nepal, Sri Lanka. So the whole South Asian regions. And we saw a lot of similarities in way LGBT members were being treated. And like Namita had highlighted, when they go to a hospital, especially if you're trans, when you're a trans woman, when you become female to male or male to female, doctors do not know how to deal with these individuals, because for them, it is not the ailment that they're looking at the individual and who has walked in through that door. So you might go with a cold or a cough or an appendix or a tooth that needs to be pulled out, but the doctor is now completely thrown off balance because they are trying to deal with who's this person, and we all try to put people in classified sections. Like in India, for instance, caste is a big issue. Caste, religion. We always need to put a tag to an individual. We just can't be seen as Indian or a human being. So when that happens, it is just a part of our psyche that, are you straight? If you're not straight, then what are you? And if you're not a heterosexual person, then there's a whole lot of price to pay for that, because then you give up on many of the privileges that the average individual has. From my own personal experience of renting a space, I work in the fashion industry. People know me as a choreographer, show director. So I am like a semi-celebrity in Chennai. People know me. So wherever I go, people recognize me. I am treated really well. But that is not the case if I was a regular gay person. I could not rent a house. Where I'm living today, my landlord was very tolerant. He understood, he didn't have an issue. I was extremely lucky. I'm one in a million to be able to rent a space. My parents, I come from an affluent background where my father said, why don't you just buy an apartment? I said, I can't buy from the money that I make. And he said, I will offer you the money to buy a flat, which I didn't feel the need at that time because I have a very liberal and tolerant landlord. That is not the case because it happened to be down the road. This is a person who knows me, and he refused to give me his house for rent because he knew I was gay. This is happening to someone who's seen as upper class, who's achieved, who's a known person. Imagine what happens to a person who works in a menial job or a blue-collar job in a small office. The moment somebody's sexuality is tangible, everybody has a problem. So I was doing this talk for the Bank of New York staff, the employees. I was doing this whole issue about gender and sexuality and inclusion in the workspace. Biggest problem. You have talented people like Magdalene Juvi, all educated and talented, qualified professionals, but they are not getting the job that they deserve. Only because of their tangible, visible sexual orientation that is judged by the employer. So now you have multinationals saying they have an inclusion policy that if you are discriminated based on gender and your sexual orientation, you can take legal action against that company. Very few. And it's only the big companies that have slowly opened up the doors, and we are seeing people from the LGBT community getting access to proper jobs in various fields. So the first transgender to work in a multinational company in Kerala got selected as she applied as a trans woman. She was selected on the base that she was a trans woman. She had the qualifications to work in the HR department, and today she's a full-time employee in USD Global as an HR executive. So it's the first of its kind. Cochin Metro has hired trans women to do their housekeeping and various other, ticket sales counter. So the government is trying to do. The mindset of the people has to change. And where does that come from? So for us, we always turn to doctors. Always. If we have an issue, we turn to a doctor. A mild cold, a fever, you sneeze, you run to the doctor. Everything is a doctor. So for us, that is an issue. None of us like to go to doctors. None of us. I have avoided the medical fraternity for ages. Because just the fact that I walk into a hospital, right from the doorman to the compounder, to the person who's giving me the medicine, the pharmacist, everybody is looking at me very differently. There's a funny look on their face, they're passing comments, and this verbal and visual harassment happens 365 days of my life, even now. So, irrelevant of who I am, if a person, an individual, is constantly being reminded, as a heterosexual person, when you walk in and out, nobody gives a shit who you are. You're just who you are. You're not being judged for being heterosexual, are you? But I'm being judged for being gay. 365 days. I'm 52 years old. It happens even now. I'm transiting at the airport. I'm at a shop buying something. I'm walking through this door. This hotel knows me. I've done hundreds of shows in this ballroom. They treat me really well because they know who I am. But when these three individuals walked in, the look, the way they're treated is different. It's unfair. You're judging them for visibly because you think, oh, she's trans. Maybe Yuvi and Namita, you won't know, but trans. And my apprehension, so I was there waiting for Magdalene because I wanted to come through. I didn't want her to have an issue. They didn't have a problem because at least hotels like this are now open. 92, when I started my first work with HIV/AIDS and working with the trans community, I could not walk into a hotel like this with my trans colleagues. I could not sit down and have a conference and talk like this to people. That was how bad it was. We used to meet up in small coffee shops. I have friends who run cafes and they open it for us. They'll allow us to sit there and talk. We had to pay a price for that because, you know, it's expensive to go into a fancy space. But that is what we did because we could afford it. This is not what happens with the average person. And we're quick to judge. And a lot of people, recently, the whole talk about sex work, and that's one thing we are lobbying for, sex work has to be legalized. It's only then that you can offer and, sex workers will have access to resources where they can take care of their lives and their health. If the current scenario where sex work is illegal in most countries, except for maybe Thailand and maybe Europe, in certain countries in Europe, the lives of these people, whether you're trans, you're female or male, whatever, if you're a sex worker, it is horrible. I mean, they don't have basic access to facilities that any human being like us could avail without even asking a question. So it's like when you live in America and they say it's the white privilege, it's the heterosexual privilege that you take for granted and you don't understand. So for us, even to be part of a conference like this, it was our calling, it was an urgent need because for us it's a request to all of you because you all come from a medical fraternity that can help us. And hopefully you all come from different parts of the world, from different parts of the country, where whatever we have to say, some of you will open up your minds to maybe making some sort of effort which will make our lives better. Thank you. And so